Sycamore, Illinois, was a quintessential small town in the 1950s. With a population of just under 6,000 residents, it was the kind of place where everyone knew their neighbors and children played freely in the streets. But on December 3rd, 1957, the town's innocence was shattered when 7-year-old Maria Ridolph vanished while playing outside her home. Maria was a bright, cheerful child, described by her mother as clever and well-behaved, but also anxious and afraid of the dark. She was the youngest of 4 children and had recently received an award for her perfect Sunday school attendance. That evening, as snow began to fall, Maria begged her parents to let her play outside with her best friend, Kathy Sigmund. Little did anyone know, this would be the last time Maria was seen alive. What followed was one of the most extensive manhunts in U.S. history, involving the FBI and thousands of volunteers. For over 5 decades, Maria's disappearance remained a haunting mystery, until a shocking deathbed confession in 2011 finally brought the truth to light. On the evening of December 3rd, 1957, Maria Ridolph and her best friend, Kathy Sigmund, were playing outside in the snow near Maria's home on Archie Place. The 2 girls were laughing and playing a game called Duck the Cars, running back and forth between an elm tree and a street pole to avoid the headlights of passing vehicles. As they played, a man approached them. He introduced himself as Johnny and struck up a friendly conversation with the girls. Kathy later described him as tall, in his early 20s, with light blonde hair slicked back, a gap in his teeth, and a thin, high-pitched voice. He wore a colorful sweatshirt and seemed harmless at first. Johnny offered the girls piggyback rides and asked if they liked dolls. Maria, eager to impress, ran inside her house to fetch a doll to show him. While Maria was inside, Johnny asked Kathy if she wanted to go for a walk around the block or take a trip in his car. Kathy, sensing something was off, declined. When Maria returned, Kathy ran home briefly to grab her mittens, leaving Maria alone with Johnny for just a few minutes. When Kathy returned, Maria and Johnny were gone. Panicked, Kathy searched the area, calling out for her friend, but there was no sign of either of them. She immediately ran to Maria's house to alert her parents, who initially thought Maria was playing a prank. Maria's 11-year-old brother was sent to look for her, but he returned empty-handed. Realizing this was no joke, Maria's parents contacted the police. Within hours, the quiet town of Sycamore was transformed into a hub of activity as hundreds of volunteers, law enforcement officers, and even the FBI joined the search. Flyers with Maria's picture were distributed across the country, and President Eisenhower was reportedly briefed on the case. Despite the massive effort, there was no trace of Maria or the mysterious Johnny. The only clue left behind was Maria's doll, found near a neighbor's garage. The case had turned from a missing persons investigation to a full-blown mystery, leaving the community in shock and fear. The disappearance of Maria Ridolph sparked one of the largest manhunts in U.S. history. The FBI quickly became involved, and the case made national headlines. Investigators interviewed dozens of witnesses, including Kathy Sigmund, who provided a detailed description of Johnny. Based on her account, authorities began searching for a tall, blonde-haired man in his early 20s with a gap in his teeth. One of the first suspects was a man named John Tessier, an 18-year-old who lived just 2 blocks from Maria's home. Tessier had a troubled past, including a history of violent behavior, and he matched Kathy's description of Johnny. However, Tessier had a seemingly solid alibi. He claimed to be in Rockford, Illinois on the night of Maria's disappearance. Enlisting in the U.S. Air Force, Tessier's family supported his alibi, telling investigators that he had been home that evening. Phone records also showed that a collect call was made from Rockford to Tessier's home at 6:57 p.m. on December 3, 1957. Additionally, Air Force recruiters in Rockford confirmed that Tessier had visited their office around 7:15 p.m. that night. Despite these alibis, some investigators remained suspicious of Tessier. His behavior during interviews was described as nervous and evasive, and he reportedly made odd comments, such as telling a recruiter, "It's a good thing I wasn't in Sycamore last night because of that missing girl." However, without concrete evidence, Tessier was removed from the suspect list, and the investigation moved on. Another suspect emerged in the form of William Henry Redmond, a carnival worker and former truck driver with a history of violence. Redmond was a suspect in the disappearances of several other young girls, including Beverly Potts, who vanished in Cleveland, Ohio in 1951. However, Redmond died in 1992, and there was no physical evidence linking him to Maria's case. For decades, the case remained unsolved. Maria's family and the community of Sycamore were left without answers, and the mystery of what happened to Maria Ridulph became one of the most infamous cold cases in American history. For over 5 decades, the case of Maria Ridulph remained unsolved, a haunting mystery that lingered in the minds of Sycamore residents and Maria's family. But in 2008, a shocking development reignited the investigation. Janet Tessier, the stepsister of John Tessier, contacted the Sycamore Police Department with a bombshell revelation. Janet claimed that on her deathbed in 1994, her mother, Eileen Tessier, had confessed that her son John was responsible for Maria's disappearance. According to Janet, Eileen had said, "Those 2 little girls and the one that disappeared. John did it. You have to tell someone." Janet had spent years trying to get law enforcement to take her mother's statement seriously, but her efforts were repeatedly dismissed. This time, however, authorities listened. The Illinois State Police reopened the case, and investigators began re-examining the evidence. They discovered inconsistencies in John Tessier's alibi. While phone records confirmed he had made a collect call from Rockford at 6:57 p.m. on December 3, 1957, investigators realized that Rockford was only a 45-minute drive from Sycamore. This meant Tessier could have been in Sycamore earlier in the evening, abducted Maria, and then driven to Rockford to establish his alibi. Further investigation revealed that Tessier had a history of predatory behavior. In the 1980s, he had been accused of sexually assaulting a teenage girl and was forced to resign from his job as a police officer in Milton, Washington. His ex-wife also alleged that he had taken inappropriate photos of his 12-year-old daughter and her friends. In 2011, investigators located Kathy Sigmund, now Kathy Chapman, and showed her a photo lineup that included a picture of John Tessier from 1957. Despite the passage of over 50 years, Kathy immediately identified Tessier as Johnny, the man who had approached her and Maria on that fateful evening. With this new evidence, authorities moved to arrest John Tessier, who had since changed his name to Jack McCullough. In July 2011, McCullough was taken into custody in Seattle, Washington, and extradited to Illinois to face charges of kidnapping and murder. The trial of Jack McCullough, formerly John Tessier, began in September 2012, nearly 55 years after Maria Ridulph's disappearance. The courtroom was packed with spectators, including Maria's family, who had waited decades for answers. The prosecution presented a compelling case, weaving together witness testimonies, alibi inconsistencies, and McCullough's disturbing history. Kathy Chapman, formerly Kathy Sigmund, took the stand and identified McCullough as Johnny, the man who had approached her and Maria on December 3, 1957. Her testimony was a pivotal moment in the trial, as she was the only living person who had seen the suspect that night. The prosecution also presented evidence that undermined McCullough's alibi. Phone records showed that while he had made a collect call from Rockford at 6:57 p.m., he could have easily driven back to Sycamore earlier in the evening to abduct Maria. Additionally, McCullough's ex-girlfriend testified that he had shown up at her house unexpectedly on the night of Maria's disappearance, looking disheveled and acting strangely. Perhaps the most damning evidence came from McCullough's own family. His half-sister, Janet Tessier, testified about their mother's deathbed confession, in which she had implicated McCullough in Maria's murder. Another sister, Jean, revealed that McCullough had a history of predatory behavior, including molesting her and other neighborhood girls when they were children. The defense argued that the case was built on circumstantial evidence and that McCullough's alibi still held up. They also questioned the reliability of Kathy Chapman's identification given the passage of over 50 years. However, the jury was not convinced. After just a few hours of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Jack McCullough was convicted of the kidnapping and murder of Maria Ridulph and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Maria's family and the community of Sycamore, it was a bittersweet moment of closure after decades of uncertainty. While the conviction of Jack McCullough brought a sense of closure to Maria Ridulph's family, the case took an unexpected turn in the years that followed. McCullough maintained his innocence and filed multiple appeals, claiming that the evidence against him was circumstantial and that his alibi had been misinterpreted. In 2015, the Illinois Appellate Court upheld McCullough's murder conviction but overturned the kidnapping charge, citing the statute of limitations. However, the court also noted that Eileen Tessier's deathbed confession should not have been admitted as evidence, as it was hearsay. Despite this, the court ruled that the remaining evidence was sufficient to uphold the murder conviction. In 2016, new evidence emerged that cast further doubt on McCullough's guilt. DeKalb County State's Attorney Richard Schmack, who had taken over the case, conducted an extensive review of the evidence. He discovered that phone records and other documents supported McCullough's alibi, placing him in Rockford at the time of Maria's abduction. Schmack concluded that McCullough could not have been in Sycamore when Maria was taken and filed a motion to vacate the conviction. In April 2017, a judge dismissed the charges against McCullough, and he was released from prison after serving nearly 5 years. The decision was met with mixed reactions. Maria's family expressed outrage, while McCullough maintained his innocence and sought to rebuild his life. Despite the dismissal, the case remains officially unsolved. In 2017, an anonymous letter was sent to Illinois police, naming a new potential suspect, but no further developments have been reported. Maria Ridulph's legacy lives on in Sycamore, where a memorial plaque stands in her honor. Her story serves as a reminder of the importance of vigilance and the enduring fight for justice. While the truth about what happened to Maria may never be fully known, her memory continues to inspire those who seek to protect the innocent and hold the guilty accountable.